Every country in the world is in debt. The U.S. debt has surpassed $38 trillion. The European Union owes $14 trillion. Japan owes $9 trillion. Even wealthy oil nations or major exporters are indebted. Naturally, one wonders, if everyone owes money, who is the lender? The answer isn't as mysterious as it seems. The world is largely indebted to itself. But that doesn't mean everyone benefits equally. Today, total global debt exceeds $315 trillion. That's almost 3 times the size of the entire world economy. Looking at how we got here, the story begins with war. In the late 1600s, England ran out of money in the middle of a conflict and borrowed from merchants, guaranteeing future interest payments in return. To manage this system, the Bank of England was founded. In other words, the state began spending money it didn't have, while the lenders started treating this government promise as an asset that could be bought and sold. This is how the modern bond system was born. Over time, this practice spread so widely that nearly all countries realized borrowing capacity was a form of power. Once, wealth came from conquering land. Now it comes from issuing interest-bearing debt on paper. Fast forward to today. It seems like everyone is lending to each other, but in reality it's a cycle. For example, the U.S. has $38 trillion of debt, but most of it is owed to American investors, banks, funds, and the central bank. Yes, the U.S. owes China is true, but it's only a tiny fraction of the total. The world is similarly interconnected. Japan lends to the U.S. lends to Europe through the IMF. Europe lends to developing countries through the World Bank. And those countries invest the foreign currency they earn back into the bonds of developed nations. It's a rotating wheel. There's also an invisible but extremely powerful actor, the markets. Massive funds, central banks, investors. They decide how much interest countries must pay when they borrow. When confidence is shaken, currencies can crash and governments can fall. That's why the thing we call the markets can be more influential than elections. Central banks sit at the very heart of this system. When they buy government bonds, they create money out of thin air in return, so the money in circulation is essentially backed by debt. There is no such thing as debt-free money. Do governments plan to pay off these debts? The truth is, no. The goal was never to reduce debt to zero. Debt exists to be rolled over. It's nothing like you taking out a loan and repaying it. Governments issue new debt to pay the old one because government debt is considered the world's safest investment product. In fact, if the U.S. paid off all its debt overnight, it would cause a massive global crisis because that safe asset everyone holds would suddenly disappear. This is why countries aim not to eliminate debt, but to keep it sustainable, trustworthy, and investable. The economy is built on this trust. If trust evaporates, interest rates skyrocket, and the system collapses. But there's another layer to this. The burden of debt is not distributed equally within society. Interest payments mostly come from taxes paid by ordinary people and flow upward to large funds and investors. So the debt system creates a transfer not just between nations, but also between social classes. In the end, the modern financial world has transformed debt into money itself. Governments issue debt, banks multiply it, investors trade it, and citizens live their lives trusting in this system. The line between debtor and creditor has become increasingly blurred. Debt once evoked slavery. Today it represents balance. But if that balance breaks, we all remember what happens. After all, debt is a promise that cannot be held forever.